Hi, this is D-Doc, and welcome back to my Jungian Typology series, where basically I attempt to explain Jungian Typology. Today we're going to go over the remaining vocabulary. So let's get started. Okay. Base stands for reducing either the type or a function to a state without orientation. This is also another terminology I made up because I wanted to describe what this is. You will know these if you know Myers-Briggs. You'll know these as the letters in between the EI dichotomy and the JP dichotomy. So, intuition's the weird one, where instead of using an I, using an N or whatever. When it comes to these two placeholders, right? What do we call these without their orientations? Let me point that out. I use base to describe a function without orientation, which is, again, EI. Therefore, base is equivalent to data role, which is judgment perception, and information modification, denotation and connotation. Denotative perception is sensation. Connotative perception is intuition. Denotative judgment is thinking, and connotative judgment is feeling. I think that's important because, again, it's a placeholder, it's a name, so that way we do not have an empty void there that we cannot reference to. Example, both ESTP, it's an example, I'm just going to write out. See, this is where deep theory comes in. Both the ESTP and the ISTJ share the STFN base stacking. I'll explain what stacking is in a moment. You don't see this within the original 4 letters. However, if you were to write this out, ESTP has the cognitive functions that go in this order. Whereas ISTJ has cognitive functions that go in this order instead. STFN, STFN. They both have this base stacking, just not the exact same stacking. So they're both sensing, thinking, feeling, intuition in that order. That's simply what I mean by base. Alright. Function axis. A pairing in which two functions with seemingly opposing definitions are always paired together within the function stacking of a type due to how both complement each other within a person's psyche. Example, Fi and Te are always paired together despite if one is the first function and the other is the fourth, or if one is second and the other is the third. They're in agreement with each other. I feel, you think. The other judging function axis is Ti and Fe, which are also in agreement with each other. I think, you feel. So what does this mean? Using that example, let's compare the ESTJ to the INFP real quick. The ESTJ has these functions in this order, at least the first 4 functions. The INFP has these exact same functions, but reversed. So, TE, FI, FI, TE. These two are always connected. They're inseparable. They're just in different places within the function stacking. The ESTJ could not function without their intuitive feeling, despite what they think. Same goes for the INFP with their extra thinking. Everyone has a thinking function and a feeling function. So even though the ESTJ is a dominant thinking type, they still have their feeling function. It's just deeper into the subconscious. Same thing goes for the INFP. They're feeling first, but they'll think later. T and Fi are best buds forever and ever. The opposite of that would be Fe and Ti. We feel, I think. That would look like this. It's the same thing. Extroverted feeling, introverted thinking. Introverted thinking, extroverted feeling. The ESFJ goes we feel first and then I think. The INTP goes I think first and then we feel. Now, just to clarify something real quick, I'm obviously oversimplifying when I say we feel, you think, or whatever I was saying before. I'm oversimplifying so you understand what a function axis is. This is a function axis, and this is a function axis. These two function axes, axi, whatever, are opposite from each other. And that's just talking about the judging functions. It's the same for the perceiving functions. You see how extra intuition and E and introvert sensation SI are both paired with each other, always and always. They're also best friends. Their opposites are the SE and NI. So there are four function xi. This is one, this is one, this is one, and this is one. There are four of them, two of them are perceiving, two of them are judging. So in this case, with the perceiving ones, this one is I sense, we intuit. It doesn't really even make that much sense, just go with it. This one's we sense, I intuit. So again, oversimplification, not even that, it's bastardization, but again, just really make a point about what a function axis is. Function stacking. Functions are arranged in a specific balanced order which will determine type. The usual order switches back and forth between orientation and data role and identifies the first four functions that a person prefers over the other four functions. However, there are also models which detail how all 8 functions are ordered in each type. That is basically saying what this is, what these things are. This is a function stack. A function stacking, or function stack, whichever you prefer. That's basically that. What are the favored functions that a type uses? I would suggest starting out with understanding each type's first 4 functions, which are their favorite functions, their most valued functions, and then if you get into a model which values detailing the order of all 8 functions, so that you'll see that in socionics, then you at least know the first 4, and then, well, in socionics, okay, disclaimer, in socionics, it wouldn't be showcasing this, at least if you're using model A, it wouldn't be showcasing the kind of functions for, like, say, ESTP over here, like that. The MBTI version is this. The Socionics Model A version that for this type within socionics, that's how it looks. That's how all 8 functions are laid out within socionics model A. And I'm just going to throw another disclaimer here. I'm not claiming that ESTP in Myers-Briggs is the same as ESTP in socionics. Because one time I've said before that basically all you had to do within socionics is, like, for introverted type, you can just, like, switch the PJ, so, like, at the end, capital P, lowercase j, would it be Myers-Briggs, INFP, socionics, INF, short j. I used to do that a lot. I still kind of do it because I have my own personal reasons, but people won't agree that it's the same type. They'll say, actually, in socionics, you're talking about this type, or in Myers-Briggs, it'll show up as this type, or even a completely different type. Because, again, the models do not translate clearly over to each other, despite how much I want them to. But that is not the point of why I brought all this up. If you're like me and you insist that there's got to be some translation, however wrong you may be, if you're like me, then you have to get this down first and then be able to get this down, because this is much more complex. So this takes time to learn, much more time to learn. This one, just get this down first for all 16 types. And then, that's not even talking about, like, Dave's superpowers. If you're wondering who I mean when I say Dave's superpowers, I'm talking about the objective personality model. But ESTP in that one is basically the same as this one, but then you have animals. Okay, so this is an animal. This is also an animal. This is also an animal. And this is the fourth animal. And then you may have functions that are masculine, and the other one would be feminine. Not that I agree with the naming, but that's how they name it in their model. Objective personality gets crazy with that. I don't even necessarily even agree with, like, the masculine and feminine, but that's just how they do it in their model. So this is basically talking about different stackings within different models. Type. The same cognitive functions in the same stacking. Officially, there are 16 types in total. However, other models consider there to be more, but this depends on which conditions they've added. So, like I said, this is a type. ESTP is a type. ESTP is one of 16 types. Maybe I should list out all 16 real quickly. I'm also listing this out from empirical to interpretative, the order, supposedly. Not saying that necessarily because you have one type, you're more empirical than another type, or more interpretative than another type. I do not want to create some sort of empirical interpretative bias. I'm just listing it out that way because that's how my brain works. Just wanted to clarify there. So these are all 16 types. These are all the 16 types, the traditional original 16 types. In some models, like in objective personality, I think they have 512 types. In socionics, they have 16, although that is not including any subtypes in some they may have. And Myers-Briggs, it's strictly 16. Each model varies within how many types they have, but they all start out with the original 16. I mean, I haven't met a model yet that has left the original 16 behind. Like, I mean, I haven't seen any model that have subtracted. I've only seen models that added or stayed the same. Quadra. 4 types which share the same cognitive functions but not the same stacking. There are 4 quadras in total: alpha, beta, gamma, and delta. These are both delta. These are both alpha. You can tell because of their cognitive functions. To be a delta type, you have to have extra thinking, introverted sensation, extra intuition, and introverted feeling as your valued functions as your first 4. In order to be alpha type, you need to have extroverted feeling, introverted sensation, extroverted intuition, introverted thinking as your valued 4. ESTP is beta because it has these functions, and the beta quadra requires you to have these functions in order to be a beta type. This one's delta because it shares the same functions as these guys. So that's what that means by like quadra. That's further down in the series. I'll explain more of the usefulness of quadra. I learned it originally from socionics, but objective personality has this. Myers-Briggs doesn't. Objective personality has this. However, they don't call them quadras, and they don't call them by like quadra names. They simply categorize by like the cognitive functions, and then they end up doing something like, you know, this quadra has these types, and this quadra has these types, instead of just naming them by, you know, something simpler than that, because that, again, that's kind of a mouthful. The NFJSTP types that all share the same cognitive functions, that's kind of inconvenient. Quadra. Alright, as long as we understand that. Finally, we are down to our last 2 definitions. Typing, determining the type to which a person belongs to. There are many typing methods, but it's important to type a person based on the cognitive functions and not on behavior. You end up kind of typing on behavior anyway, it just can't be solely on behavior. I clarify more in this section here. It is important to remember that everyone can potentially do everything. It just depends on awareness and preferences. Behavior, the way in which one acts or conducts oneself, especially towards others. Functions may cause someone to behave in certain ways, but it is false to type a person based solely on momentarily or temporary behavior. It is important to realize that while a person might appear one way in one situation, they may completely change in another situation, because essentially everyone can potentially do everything. It just depends on awareness and preferences. It is better to type someone's behavior over a long period of time, preferably over the course of months, years, etc., rather than type them quickly. You need to get to know the person before you can officially type them. So, this is objective personality's biggest strength, is their typing method. It is actually much more objective than self-typing. It's much more objective than tests. It's simply 2 outside people who are separated from each other, both typing you, and then they come together with the results, and they say, hey, you typed this person this way, I got a different type, let's talk about why we got that different type. And then they correct themselves, and eventually get to the type that they determine you as. But it is more objective because it takes away the subjective bias that you see here. This guy's biased. We're all biased. You do not want biased typing. I mean, if you're using Jungian Typology as more of a hobby, as more of a side thing, as not quite as serious, then okay, it doesn't matter. You can have your subjective typings if it helps you. However, if you want to take this more seriously, you need to remove the subjective bias as much as possible. I do have a little bit of an analogy to go with this. So, one time, a long time ago when I was a kid, I had always known from the very beginning that I had a peanut allergy. And my parents didn't know this originally about me. I had tried to tell them before that I had a peanut allergy, and they kind of just brushed to the side. Like, I didn't really pay too much attention to it. So I always had this peanut allergy. Sometimes I would doubt it, but I kind of knew deep down because the peanut butter always smelled weird to me, right? And so what happened, so I went to the fridge, and there's some Chinese food that my dad left in the fridge, some old Chinese food, right? And it was cooked with peanut oil. Now, I didn't know this. I just knew there was some Chinese food, and I was hungry. So I ate it, and I started to have an allergic reaction to it. A long story short, we went to the doctor. The doctor finally tested me and said, hey, she has a peanut allergy. And I looked at both my mom and the doctor and said, well, duh, I told you I had a peanut allergy before. I just wish I knew it was in the Chinese food before, because then I wouldn't have eaten the Chinese food. I could have told you I had a peanut allergy. So my mom and the doctor go, well, if that's okay, you knew that. Excuse like, yeah, you know your body best. And it's funny because I'm telling them, like, yeah, I know my body best. I'm telling you. It took forever to reach to this point. So, why do we bring this story up? Well, it's because Jungian typology and the different models are basically different languages. And Jungian typology as a whole is a language. It's just a language to describe who you are, essentially. Now, in other words, you are not your type. You are who you are. Your type is simply just a name, so that way people can look at that type and say, oh, you think in the similar patterns to this way. Okay, so I know not to give you this kind of food because you're going to have an allergic reaction to it. Or rather, I know not to assume that you can take my extra sensation information so easily because, say, it's your vulnerable function, or it's a function it's information you can't process very well, and so therefore I have to be a little bit more patient with you before you can actually take in the information. People cannot change who you are. You are going to have a process of thinking that is solely yours. Another thing too I want to add is that when someone says that they don't like Myers-Briggs, for example, because that's the most common model, they will say, oh, I don't like Myers-Briggs because, it puts people in boxes. And I agree, if you're using it wrong, it puts people in boxes. You need to learn to use it correctly. Do not use Jungian typology to put people in boxes. You should use Jungian typology in order to understand other people, because otherwise you're simply just saying, oh, well, if you're this kind of person, then you go in that kind of box. So, and that's wrong. You should be saying instead, well, okay, you seem to be displaying this kind of pattern of thinking. Therefore, I'm going to say you're this type in order to interact with you better. And I'm open to saying you're a different type. That's the most important part. Be open to saying someone's a different type. At the end of the day, Jungian typology shouldn't be used as if it's fate. This is your fate. Your fate has been written in stone, sort of way. No. Jungian typology should be used as a language to better understand your world with. And if you're not using that way, then you're using it wrong. That's the danger that comes with typing. Typing can be very useful in order to understand yourself better, in order to understand the people around you better, but it can also be detrimental and break down relationships and give you a delusion of yourself. You don't want to get to that point. You need to be careful when you're typing. And I think this should be emphasized more. Anyway, that's all I had for my video. Hopefully it's not too long. Hopefully I explained things correctly. Please give me constructive criticism in the comments. I hope this series is helping you guys out. Thank you guys for tuning in. I'll see you in the next video. Have a wonderful day.